life. Really, that first job is something that really sets them on the path to long-term success. And as Jonelle just mentioned, there are various reasons why we're a portion of this and a part of this. As many of you know, one of my personal passions is being able to go from poverty to prosperity. How do we bridge that gap? I think transit's one of them, but of course, a job, a good job, is a key component of that. Jim Clifton, who's the chairman of the Gallup Corporation, they do various reviews and polls all over the world. He recently published a book called The War on Jobs, and he said that in all of their history, and they've been around for a number of years, in all of their history, they've just stumbled upon the most interesting and most exciting thing they've ever stumbled upon. And the question was, what do 7 billion people want? And that's pretty much the population of the entire world. And they said, it's a job. Not just a job, but a good job. And so they said that's a staggering finding across the world. That is the most important thing in various reaches of the earth. So when we think about the opportunity that we have as an organization to do something like this and encourage summer youth and encourage other organizations, even in the private industries, to start stepping up and doing the same thing, I think we could have an incredibly long-lasting effect on the problem that we see with youth employment, but then long-term success in regards to getting folks able to be on a path where they're getting education and then also employment long-term. So I applaud Commissioner Smith and all of her efforts and all of the years that she's dedicated to this effort, and also for joining the Workforce Investment Board and giving us that passion and giving us that ability to utilize that passion in a positive way, and Jonelle's leadership in moving forward. And then Heather Fick is actually in the crowd. She works for Work Systems Inc., and she was one of the key people that we were able to get connected with TriMet to make sure that this process and project came off the way it needed to be able to ensure that we've got an opportunity to provide jobs, summer jobs to 30 youth, and we hope that we have an opportunity to continue that well into the future.
Excellent comments.
Just add thanks to Commissioner Smith and of course to Jonelle and to a young lady from South Sudan. Don't let 9 o'clock in the morning be a problem. The next job may have you up at 6 o'clock, but the most important thing that this is helping you to learn is the responsibility to meet time commitments. Whether it's at 9 in the morning or if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, timing is very important, particularly in the business world and in the work world. So I applaud you for finishing Vincent and going on to college as well. Be great and be successful, and come back and be a model for us as to what work systems and internships accomplish and what others can do as well by watching and following you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It's very informative.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Board President, to continue with a few notes. Obviously, I want to thank Commissioner Smith and for her leadership in all of this. But I also want to thank a couple other parties. One is TriMet staff, who work really hard to make these programs successful and make the work experiences successful. So I want to thank Jonelle for his leadership in that regard, but also many other staff people, including Diane Goodwin from our general manager's office, and many other people who work very closely with the interns to really make the effort and the job experience successful over the year. I also wanted to thank Drew Garcia, an intern who actually created that video. And so thank you very much, Drew, for that work. I don't know if he's here.
Yeah.
He may have been. But obviously we have some talented people who are in our midst, and I'd say the other great benefit is that we draft off the energy of youth, and so it's terrific to have these people around. And needless to say, as you saw with the video, some very good work gets accomplished at the same time. So it is a win-win opportunity. Anything else? I'll continue with the general manager's report. I did want to share a little bit of good news regarding our advertising contract. As many of you know, the advertising world has changed pretty dramatically over the last years, 5 years in particular, since we have re-advertised the advertising contract. We had projected in our forecast a dramatically reduced amount of advertising revenue coming forward because of those changes in the marketplace. But you should also know that we've been involved with an RFP process to find the contractor for the next few years. And we had 3 responsive submissions related to that RFP. And a committee of staff evaluated it, and Lamar Obie Corporation, which is the current provider, was the selected proposer. Prime reason is that their guarantee, their minimum to TriMet, was $4 million higher than the next highest proposer. That's over a 5-year term. So the company's guarantee is a proposal of nearly $25 million for the 5-year base, plus options for 2 additional years. And so what that means is that we have increased revenue by about $1 million a year based on that advertising contract. So that will be something we'll be talking to you about, particularly as we begin to look at resources for restore and treatment service and other requirements that we have as we move ahead. I would still note that this contract is about $9 million less than the previous one, which does indeed, over its term, which indeed recognizes that the advertising business has changed dramatically, moved, as we know, much more online, much less in terms of print and display advertising. And so we are suffering a decline, just not as much of a decline as we were predicting in our forecast. So that's very good news. There is some little bit of DBE opportunity associated with this, but I would note that there's very little subcontracting opportunity associated with a contract like this. So that would be relatively small, $10,000 to $12,000 annually that we'll be working with a contractor to secure. And again, under a revenue contract, under the delegation authority, I have the ability to enter into that, and when it's ready, will do that. But again, we have a September deadline in terms of the expiration of the current contracts. But I thought it was very good news I wanted to share with you. A quick update also on our discussions with Opal regarding the transfer policy. I would say that we continue to have very respectful and open and good dialogue with Opal. Regarding, for example, the Eco Northwest calculations that have been shared with you. And again, some issues related to the interpretation of some of the data and the factors involved have been brought to Eco Northwest's attention, and they're evaluating what impact those changes or different interpretations might have. So at your next meeting, which is September 11th, we invited Opal to create a panel to address the board directly on that topic. And so you will hear from them much more, but just to note, I think it's been a very constructive conversation to date. I also wanted to update you on the frequent service topic. As I noted, we have come to you with a general proposal related to, not proposal yet, but a description of the frequent service restoration, the costs associated with that. And I've asked staff to put together a proposal that begins to look at what can be done this fiscal year and in future fiscal years. And what we'd like to do is to bring that proposal to you at your September 25th meeting for your consideration. And again, that will be a directional consideration that will be looking for direction from the board about, is this the level of investment that you see appropriate for at least this fiscal year, and obviously the chance to readdress that as future budgets and our financial forecasts are evaluated through the fall and into the next budget year. I also I told you this was a potpourri, so stop me if you have any questions on any of these topics. Related to annual ridership for fiscal year 2013, I thought I'd like to recap exactly where we stand with that. Our bus and rail operators provided over 99 million rides during fiscal year 2013. Now, overall, that is a decline of about 3%. Roughly, again, the decline is about 3.1 million rides across all modes compared to the previous fiscal year. Bus trips stayed almost exactly the same. Max trips dropped by about 7.4%. You can trace that, as we've reported to you previously, almost entirely to the elimination of the free rail zone. The good news is, of course, West ridership continued to grow 5.3% compared to fiscal year 2012. And again, West ridership has increased every month since February 2009. Again, the 3% decline is primarily due to the elimination of free rail zone, but we also had a new fare structure that changed the fare that many people were facing when they use our system. I'd also note that we had an increase in fare enforcement efforts, and that did have an effect on ridership that we saw even before the fare increase or free rail zone went into place in terms of dampening the actual numbers of people on the MAX system. And fourth, we recall that in 2012, in the spring, we had a spike in gas prices over $4, and that obviously has an effect on our ridership as well. So we're comparing to that year that had that spike in fuel prices. So the other thing I just wanted to note is that our predictions of ridership and fare revenue were essentially right on the money. So I wanted to really, once again, thank our finance staff for the diligence they put into these things. Overall, we had projected that our annual ridership would go down by 1.7%. And our actual numbers at the end of the fiscal year was down by 1.9%. So related to all of the changes, free rail zone, fare system, service changes, to come within that margin was pretty miraculous in my view. So just wanted to provide an update and ask if there are any questions about the ridership in fiscal year 13.
Don't see any. Thank you.
I'll move ahead.
Pleased to hear the numbers. I think we recognize that what was going to happen when changes were made, and I think the projections were very good. I'm glad to see that we're right on the money.
Thank you. I wanted to also provide an hours of service update. As you know, we continue to bring you our monthly safety updates. And this is the topic that we wanted to bring to you this month. And so I know Harry and Hayden were going to come up and provide a little update on hours of service. I would say generally we have some very good news to report. Recall that we had a very successful and good negotiation with the HCU related to implementing this hours of service policy. Hayden and Harry can give you the details on that. They really, because of the changes, they didn't get implemented until the new sign-up, which started in June. So we have now the experience of June, July, and part of August to report to you. And I'm very pleased for the hard work that went into this and that the trend continues to improve. So Harry, did you want to take this away?
Good morning. What I'd like to do this morning is just give you a very, very brief overview of our efforts to improve fatigue at TriMet, to manage it, but also keep in mind that the problem is not unique to TriMet, it's not unique to public transportation, it in fact really affects all industries. I've been working with the Institutes of Behavior Resources to begin the development of a fatigue management plan. And fatigue is really a very complex issue. It requires several strategies. And I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of what that is, just really a listing of it. And it really is more than just hours of service limitations. And Hayden will talk about the hours of limitations work that has been accomplished today. But what we're doing is actually evaluating the overtime policies, secondary employment, our rest facilities, recuperative breaks, rest breaks for operators, mechanics, fatigue and alertness training. We offer that today, but we're looking at, is there a way to improve this? Accident reporting and analysis, medical evaluations, and principally aimed at sleep disorders. Again, we do evaluations, but the firm that I'm working with also has quite a bit of experience in that particular area. And then lastly, something called fatigue modeling of the sleep and work patterns. So later on, what we will do is begin to survey the workforce to see what are those work patterns, what are those sleep patterns, and hopefully through the education process, we can make them better informed. But today's briefing is really principally aimed at the hours of service limitations, and Hayden's here to speak to that.
Good morning. Good morning. A bit of background. On February 4th of 2013, TriMet and the ATU reached an interim hours of service agreement for bus operators. This agreement requires 9 hours off for the extra board operators and 10 hours off for regular operators between each day's assignment. A modified form of the agreement was implemented for the spring sign-up, but full implementation of the agreement began June 3rd in conjunction with the summer sign-up. We've also added into our FY14 budget 11 more extra board operators, which we will add as we can to help us comply with the requirements of the agreement. So what has been the impact of this new agreement? For the month of June, out of 16,666 work assignments, there were 16 records of HOS violations. 10 of these violations were the result of operators being delayed back to the garage for various reasons and submitting time slips, which are processed later, that resulted in violations of the minimum time off before their next day's assignment. Another 3 violations were related to a 1 to 2 minute programming error, which when we discovered it was easily fixable, we were able to correct it and eliminate those. 1 violation was related to an operator assisting with an equipment trade. 2 violations were actual assignment errors, so an assignment that was given out that just was not in compliance by several minutes. 8 of the 16 violations were 5 minutes or less. The greatest violation was 19 minutes, which did allow for 9 hours and 41 minutes of rest. So for the month of July, out of 18,479 work assignments, there was a total of 11 records of HOS violations. 10 of these violations were the result of operators returning late to the garage and submitting time slips. 1 violation was related to assisting with a vehicle transfer. 3 of the violations involved extra board operators who are required to have 9 hours off, who were late to the garage, returned turned in time slips, resulting in violations of 8 hours and 54 minutes, so they were 6 minutes under the threshold. Another employee was only 5 minutes under, and a third employee was 9 minutes under the threshold. 8 of the above-mentioned violations involved full-time operators required to have 10 hours off. 3 of the 8 were violations of 6 minutes or less. The most extreme violation, 43 minutes, due to being late to the garage, still allowed 9 hours and 17 minutes off between the assignments. So the main point with this list of detail is that the majority of violations have been an average of about 10 minutes over the standard. So they are violations, but in terms of the spirit of HOS, we don't have any egregious violations for someone only had 5 hours off or something of that nature. For the month of August, so far, as of August 12th, barring any unforeseen time slips that may be turned in late, we have had 0 hours of service violations. And since July 20th, we've only had 1 violation. So we're showing a very steady decrease in these violations. How is it that management is monitoring and following up on these? The Executive Director of Operations, as well as Harry and the management team, receive regular updates on violations of the interim policy. Direct management oversight is provided from both our manager of workforce utilization, he oversees the station agents who make out the work, and our garage managers who work directly with the operators. For each violation, there is follow-up with the station agents if we determine that they made an error. Operators are also followed up with because they have a responsibility for the violation as well. Operators are required to inform the station agents when they are aware that their work assignment or that some unforeseen delay back to the garage might affect their hours of service compliance for the next day's assignment. So final conclusions and observations. The implementation of the agreement is moving us steadily towards full compliance. We have completed 2 operator sign-ups in which operators have been required to make selections of work that are in compliance with the new policy, and they're adjusting to the impact of the agreement. Certainly we have some employees that are not as happy with it as the way things worked before, but overall I think there's an understanding that this is the direction we're going and that ultimately it will work out to everybody's satisfaction. There's an ongoing labor management series of meetings that we continue to refine implementation of the policy. Work in this area by TriMet and ATU teams has been constructive and collaborative, and I've been involved with those. I would like to say that it's been an overall positive experience. Open for any questions.
This, I think, just one question in regards to, you answered in regards to how is management able to track consistently and ongoing the kind of the hours of service. Are there any additional tools that the actual operators have at their, at their disposal to assist them? I mean, is it just basically when they get off work, I'm thinking specifically in situations where something may have delayed them getting back to the garage. I'm just wondering if there's any tools that they have to help them in regards to knowing, as opposed to if it's a schedule, then you can be pretty proactive with that.
Well, the methodology at this point is really to reinforce for the operator that if something's happened, it's different, because so far the sign up essentially makes sure that everybody signs into a correct assignment. So if something out of the ordinary happens and they're late, the first place to verify their standing is to talk to the station agent. And the station agent has the ability to do some work right there and say, yeah, you're going to be over for tomorrow's assignment, so we're going to adjust what you do. So I would say that the majority of our violations are around these time slips, and the drop-off, the dramatic drop-off of violations has been the result, I think, of a consistent informing of the employees, their responsibility, and they're thinking about that now that they come in. In the past, they used to just maybe set a work pouch up there with a time slip in it and walk out the door. Now they know they can't do that. So that's the principal method.
Well, you are right. It is excellent to see the reduction, and I think in the future it'd be interesting to kind of connect and hear back. You did mention that some folks were kind of unhappy with the change. It would be interesting to hear some of those feedback and comments in the future. So thank you for the report and for the efforts.
So in the future briefings, we will provide an update in all the other areas as well.
Excellent.
Dr. Bethel, do you have any? I guess I just want to follow up on, I think, maybe you and I are thinking exactly the same way. This would have been an unbelievably good example of how labor and management can work together. It is a good example of how labor and management work together. I'd love to have somebody from the union at the table with you, giving us their perception of the.
And in fact, we have a partner in that team's present, Sandra Gingrich.
Yeah, so if they want to make any remarks, I'd love to, wouldn't mind hearing.
Love to hear.
Hi, I'm Sandy. I'm the executive board officer.
Come on up, please.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for coming.
Hi, I'm Sandy. I'm Sandra Gingrich, ATU 757 executive board officer, and I have been involved in some of these talks. Some of the complaints we've had are very small, like you said. When you have a driver that gets up at, say, to be at work at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I come from Scappoose, so I have to be up at 2, okay? You come in at 4 and you end up with a split, and this is, you get done at like 9 in the morning, then you gotta come back at, say, 3 in the afternoon and work till 7:30, but now there's some semis flipped over on the freeway and I come in late. And the next morning I have to be there at 4 or something in the morning. Now I'm in an hours of service violation because I'm a regular operator with 10 hours. So now they're gonna tell me to come back later to make sure I'm off 10 hours. Well, I can't get something at 9 because we don't have reports at that time, right? Might be able to get something that starts at noon. Well, now I get a noon report and I come in and now I gotta work for 2 in the morning. You've now just changed my sleep pattern. How safe is that? Okay, so that's one scenario. We have very small numbers of that. We try to find trades, our station agents do try to work with us. They know how bad it is to change someone's sleep pattern. I think we're still working on where is the happy hour? Is 10 the right one? Is 9 the right one? You know, you gentlemen work late nights too, so if I told you you had to come in at noon and work till 2 in the morning, you're probably gonna be asleep about 9:30, 10 o'clock and not wanting to really do your job productively and safely and make good decisions. And that's what we're doing behind the wheel, no different than you. We're making decisions by the second. You got drunk drivers out at night, you got intoxicated people crossing the street. We have people that might not have good eye vision at night, you know what I mean? So we've got to really keep working at this and finding that happy hour, and I hope that keeps continuing. I have to say Hayden's been very well working with this. I haven't worked with Harry, so I don't know about his input on that. Sorry, Harry, but I'm not going to throw you under the bus too much there. You weren't there. And I just have to say, I sit at the signups. I do the signups. We've done some projects on seeing how we can do signups better. Because we do a cafeteria style signup. We pick work by each day, each bid. And we looked at other things. We found that we were harming more people, so we didn't want to really change it. But we're going to bring some more information back to the ATU is to see if there's some different styles. So I don't know if 9 and 10 is the perfect hour. We've got to really figure that out, you know. And that'll continue to talk, and they're open to listen too. So thanks.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Here's an example of the work-sleep analysis that needs to be done. So that will be part of this project. So there is lots more work.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we'll get a survey out too. Like I can sit at sign up and do some surveys and do some questions for the drivers. You know, I want to put a survey that says, you know, go ahead and write how you really feel. Maybe some just yes no questions.
All right.
She must have been reading the work plans.
All right, excellent report. I'm glad to see that everybody's rolled up their sleeves and working together on this, because we knew it wouldn't be easy to implement, so again, thanks.
I do want to thank the ATU for their cooperation and good work on all of this. For very, very, very good cooperation from everybody. I did have one other, under the general manager report, I asked Bob Nelson to come up. In July, we welcomed Bob. As you know, he's been digging into the whole question of how do we improve the quality of our service for our customers, how do we improve the quality of service for those who actually see the service on the street. He's been working with the help of consultant Barbara Ramirez and been looking at some key areas. We shared some of those with you in a report. I've asked him to briefly review his findings and where he is in this process. So
Thank you, Neil. Board members, good morning. At last month's debriefing, I mentioned that we had engaged a consultant, Barbara Ramirez Spencer, who has considerable transit experience in New York City's MTA, to assist us in reviewing and contrasting certain TriMet work processes against those of 5, let's say, peer transit agencies. And those transit agencies were Dallas and Denver, Minneapolis, San Diego, and Salt Lake City. The 4 areas of examination were the Operations Center or Control Center. That's the unit of our agency that dispatches buses and controls the movement of trains. Right sizing of transportation management. What should it look like and how are our peer agencies staffing? Frontline employee communication, which is a very difficult issue for all of us in transit because most of our employees are not in front of us, they're out there. So how do we communicate with them in meaningful ways? And then finally, bus operator training. So those were the 4 areas of examination. Now, we undertook this study to help us improve efficiencies and in doing so advance the perspective of the customer. We did that, we were hoping to get a better understanding of how to improve operational processes, identify problems quickly and systematically. That's this notion of root cause analysis, right? Where we can get at a problem, not always work the same problem and correct it problem after problem, but look at causality of the problem and eliminate it. Establish valid and reliable service measures. We capture an enormous amount of performance data. And we use it, but the study suggests that we can use it better, more assertively, more directionally to drive change. And then finally, more precisely determine single points of accountability. In a large operational organization such as ours, the delivery of service and the performance of tasks are accomplished by numbers of people. So accountability gets diluted. And so by more narrowly identifying accountability, not in a way to point a finger at someone who did when something goes wrong, but to empower that person to take ownership for results. So that was also part of this. Now, in addition to talking to peer transit properties, the consultant also talked with about 30 of our senior and middle managers, as well as representatives from our frontline and station agent, bus dispatch, and rail control. We have received that final draft of the study. It's entitled Measuring Up, and we're in the process of reviewing those findings and recommendations. Notwithstanding the fact that the study indicates that TriMet measures up pretty well in those 4 categories against those 5 entities, we understand that the notion of continuous improvement, which the general manager has directed, should prompt us not to be satisfied with the status quo, and that continuous improvement is aimed at never allowing a successful organization, and we are a successful organization, to be content or stand still. Those recommendations are juxtaposed against a series of challenges. Because when you talk about change in an organization, in a large public organization, driving change has difficulty. There's resistance, there's confusion, there's a misunderstanding of why. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of the recommendations. The draft report, the draft study will be available. But I wanted to let you know that we're going to be focusing on these findings and developing strategies for implementation. We'll be forming working groups that will look at each of the 4 areas of examination and the subsequent recommendations. We're going to do that in combination with continuing to incorporate and advance this notion of culture of safety, service delivery, vehicle reliability, and operator support. They're all connected. We're going to adopt and execute continuous improvement processes as a way of looking at how can we do our work better. This is simply a never-ending effort to discover and eliminate the main causes of problems. That's a big component of continuous improvement. I'll be looking for incremental improvements, understanding that a process improvement is always a work in progress. It's never there because the notion of continuous improvement is it's ongoing. And that continuous improvement is and aimed at improving processes and outcomes through simplification, not complexity. Meaning that we want to deconstruct a problem. And when we look at solving a problem and we modify, change, or otherwise revise a procedure or a process without deconstructing the original process, we will often build a change upon an unsatisfactory process in the first place. So that's this notion of root cause analysis. We're going to dial in, each of these work groups will dial in appropriate frontline personnel in that area of examination to make sure we're getting the proper feedback and that the direction we're going aligns. So it's important to generate ideas from the frontline workforce. There's no question about that. They have a very good perspective on things. So in a quick summary, this study indicates that we're doing pretty well, but that we can do better. And if we can do better, we should do better. And if we can do better, the public would expect us to do better. And so that's the direction that this study is putting us in, and we're going to pursue it in that manner. Take any questions, please?
No, thank you very much. Look forward to hearing the progress as you make.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes the general
All
manager
right.
report, a bit extended, again, our apologies, but we wanted to update you on all those particular items.
Okay, thank you. So the last item on the briefing agenda is climate smart communities. And is Eric here? Good.
Yes.
Come on.
Perhaps, Mr. Board President, as Eric comes up, and also Kim Ellis from Metro, who is the project manager on this. I would just like to reiterate that this was brought to you at the request of Board Member Prosser. He's heard this presentation, so it's okay that he's on vacation, but of course he's a member, represents the agency at Impact at Metro. And he wanted to make sure in the context of the strategic financial plan that the board understood how much the region is expecting from us in terms of new service to fulfill both growth and development objectives, but also ensuring access to all members of our community and also to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the long run. And it's very interesting as you go through these reports and the scenarios and the analysis that's going to be done. I think there's going to be increased focus on transit service as one of the key strategies associated with that. Eric has, again, been our key contact in terms of helping with this work. And again, Kim is Metro's lead on the project here. So my hope is that we go through the presentation and the questions you may have.
Thank you
very much for the time today to brief you on this. I think, as Neil suggests, it's really important that the board understand the long-term expectations of really quite significant transit service expansion in the future that the region has, and that the state-mandated climate smart community scenarios project is really updating those expectations, and so it's important we pay attention to that as the board engages in the strategic financial plan. In terms of the region's expectations for transit service, they're currently reflected in the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP, that I'll use for short, which represents the long-term transportation plan for the whole region with input from all local jurisdictions and other stakeholders. To meet the region's expectations, TriMet currently will need to grow need to more than double service by 2035 to keep up with population growth and substantially increase the share of trips taken on transit. So the current RTP, the 2035 RTP, has a goal of tripling mode share for transit by 2035, and so that's the current goal, which is being updated. However, the current financially constrained RTP, i.e. what resources we have that we can demonstrate we can reasonably expect, actually only keeps up with that population growth, which is about a 30% growth by that period. And so there's a substantial gap there that we're talking about in terms of being able to meet the highest aspirations for service growth.
Could we go over that one more time?
Sure,
I think
sure.
that's important to make sure I understand.
Yes, so the goal, the aspirational goal that the RTP sets is for tripling mode share for transit, also biking and walking, by the way, but the current financially constrained RTP, so what the feds accept as reasonably expected resources, currently would fund 30% growth. So there is a gap there.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for asking for clarification. And so clearly then identifying new resources for transit is going to be an important part of the regional conversation, and climate smart communities is a place where the conversation is currently happening. It will not resolve that discussion, but I think it's very much framing the need and setting up that conversation. And so the timing of the strategic financial plan is excellent from that perspective. Just a little bit more in terms of the project objectives and timeline, so you're familiar with that, not to get too in the weed on the process, but just so you're aware of what it is. So state law passed a couple of years ago requires the Portland area to reduce carbon emissions from cars and light trucks by 20% by 2035 as part of meeting statewide greenhouse gas goals. So that's the specific target. It doesn't, for example, directly apply to reductions from transit service, but transit is a tool being used to reduce those emissions. Through 2014, through next year, Metro and local partners will be studying scenarios that represent what the area could look like in 2035, with a variety of transportation and land use strategies being tested. So while reducing emissions is part of the state mandate, the process is really about developing a scenario for how we want to live, move, and grow in the region. The scenarios are not one size fits all, and the single region-wide scenario that's required by the state is really going to be made up of the adopted plans and visions of the cities and counties across the region. So next year, by the end of next year, the region must adopt one scenario that represents these local goals, but can also reduce those emissions by 20%. And this final adopted scenario can mix and match from elements that have been under consideration. It's not an either or choice, and I'll give you a little more information in the handout there in terms of where we are in that process. And then so you know what happens with this scenario is it essentially gets incorporated into the region's 2040 growth concept, really is updating that, and then is going to be reflected in the next RTP update in 2018. We're doing a sort of a quick update right now to be in federal compliance, but the region's visions and the policy changes are going to be implemented in the 2018 RTP, so that's where this is going to get embedded ultimately in regional plans. So briefly on the status, after some preliminary testing of the range of these strategies over the last couple of years to see what do we get with these, we've really worked toward narrowing down to three scenarios that we're currently evaluating. And the handout that was provided in your packet and also for audience members at check-in really, this is from Metro, describes the current status of those scenarios. And so those three scenarios really represent different levels of investment and policy action envisioned. And those range from, in terms of transit service particularly, a continuation, well actually this is generally true, sorry, a continuation of recent trends using current resources, scenario A, to scenario B, adopted plans and approved resources, and then C, new resources and new plans, including new pricing mechanisms to raise revenue in order to implement those new plans. At current, based on preliminary evaluation, our sense is that scenario A is unlikely to meet the target in terms of emissions reductions. But we thought it was important to show where we currently are going with current trends and current resources so that the region understands whether or not the status quo is going to meet the goals. Scenario B may meet the target, but we need to continue to evaluate that to see. And scenario C is expected to meet the target, though the question, of course, remains about the ability to implement those new programs and new resources. In terms of specific transit service growth envisioned, on the backside of that, the transit elements are highlighted. Those also differ with each of those, ranging from the low end to really a continuation of the modest investments we've made to address overcrowding, such as are included in the FY14 budget for implementation this fall, to, at the high end, doubling service over and above population growth. So again, that 30% to keep up with population growth and then doubling service on top of that. So far, public outreach to date has found that increased transit service is a popular strategy, that folks around the region are interested in that. So now it's a matter of figuring out exactly how much this would cost and what the benefits are as well, importantly. And so this summer, Metro staff, with our assistance, are evaluating these three scenarios to see what their costs and benefits are in terms of economic, environmental, social equity, and public health outcomes, as well as the greenhouse gas emission reductions. So that's where we are in the process. So more information coming this fall. We'll be going back to the impact and JPAC tables for further discussion. And then through the next year, there'll be discussion about narrowing to that final adopted scenario. So again, timing I think is good for the strategic financial plan. And so just to really emphasize what we think some of the implications are as you all consider that, we really feel that the board should be engaged in shaping and responding to the region's expectations about transit service growth in the future and designing the strategic financial plan accordingly. I think it's clear that TriMet and the region and perhaps the state will need to identify additional resources to meet the region's expectations to close that gap, even as we bring future cost growth down to sustainable levels. How much we need to grow will depend on the final scenario adopted, and so we think it's important that the TriMet board and the strategic financial plan serve as an input into that to show what is possible in terms of transit service growth, not simply respond to the region's goals, but that it needs to be an interactive conversation so that we shape this together and are building our expectations and resources accordingly. So at your July board meeting, Board Member Prosser and former Board Member Schweitzer framed a couple of key policy questions in the context of the strategic financial plan that I think are also very relevant in the context of climate smart communities. Again, those were what is required to ensure current revenues are adequate in perpetuity to maintain current service. So make sure that we're at least doing the baseline, but how does TriMet pay for the system growth required to meet regional expectations? So those really are the questions at hand for this. With that, I'd turn it back to Neil to emphasize or help handle any questions, and Kim's here as well to answer any particular questions you might have regarding the process.
There's a question from the board. First off, Kim, do you have any comments or thoughts you want to?
No, just I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share this information with Eric. I think as we go forward to release the results this fall, we will like to continue engaging you in that conversation either through briefings to the board or through other venues as appropriate.
A couple quick questions in regards to, so I am a supporter of climate smart communities. I say that because I think I've been a couple of the videos that actually support it. So, but ultimately, you know, there's a little bit of caveat in that we balance out, you know, our efforts here with job creation, ensuring that we've got good jobs for the folks that live in our communities. This is the first time that I've heard such a significant, I shouldn't say input, but emphasis on the transit. I mean, and some of the conversations we've heard, some of the presentations I've heard, transit has been a tool and certainly something that we need to utilize in this effort. But I've heard more in the sense that, I mean, we're looking at reduction of emissions by cars and light trucks. And when we think about that, I mean, I didn't get a good chance to look through all of this information, but as I think about different strategies, I think about kind of the in-migration and out-migration that happens within our communities and being able to live where you work and having an opportunity to reduce, you know, our carbon emissions in that regard, and then improving similar, you know, I know East County fairly well, so improving things like north-south connections from transit would, I think, would improve the ability for folks to live and work in their own communities. The other thing that I wanted to kind of ask a question about is, just the other day, I had the rare opportunity of driving a Tesla. It wasn't mine, nor am I planning on buying one, but I did get a chance to drive one, and I gotta say that it was exhilarating, more so than I would have ever thought that an electric car could be. I could go 300 miles on a single charge. You know, as I think about the significant impact that that could have as those prices come down, you know, I find that as we look towards the future, there could be some significant changes and adjustments in the way we look at fuel emissions from carbon emissions from vehicles and even light trucks because of this electric technology. How does that play into the scenarios that we're talking about here?
It's a good question. To note, the target, that 20% reduction that was set, really was based off of a lot of work that the state did to evaluate essentially what technology changes on the vehicle side they think will be possible during the horizon of this plan. Similar, built on work done for what's called the statewide transportation strategy that looked not just at that sector, but all transportation sectors. And so what the 20% represents is how much essentially you need to get in addition to the technology changes already built in based on the assumptions. And so all the electric vehicle development and adoption is envisioned within that already, and then it's really those land use and other transportation strategies that are the focus of climate smart communities, which is how the rule was created to do the process. And so certainly there's been discussion about whether those are the appropriate assumptions. Some of them were based in the state law, and I'll let Kim maybe speak a little bit more to that. But I think the plan is also one that is evolutionary over time, and so if we see that different things that we never envisioned come to bear, or the adoption rates are much more aggressive than we expected, then perhaps that target could be reset. And so that's also part of the state rule that this is not a one-time only, but an evolutionary process. Kim, I don't know if there's more to add.
What I would add is just that the state recognized that there is a lot of uncertainty about what the deployment rate and how quickly technology will change. It has been changing. So the Land Conservation and Development Commission is scheduled to review the targets again in 2015 in recognition that there may be new information. The modeling work and the analytical work that we're doing to help inform the policy discussions about what should be included in that preferred scenario. Within that, it does account for, you know, basically the best available information that we have at this time about what the state felt was reasonable to assume.
Maybe to your other point, I would just note that those other land use strategies very much are embedded in here, and so you know, we're trying to bring to bear those other strategies of bringing housing and jobs together. And importantly, you're aware of our service enhancement plans. Those really are the vehicle by which we would describe how this service increase would happen. And as you know, we're working very closely with our partners throughout the region in defining those, as well as other stakeholders, and job access is a key focus of that. And so as we're developing the service plans that we would implement through this, it would be very much focused on providing those strategies.
Well, I can tell you that innovation is something that is sometimes very, very unpredictable, and certainly I would have not thought about driving an electric vehicle until I drove the Tesla the other day. And so it's certainly an innovative idea, a new product that I think could potentially change even projections that was made 6 to 12 months ago in regards to this technology. That might be an impact to the way we drive and the way we utilize transportation in the future. But there's certainly a lot of other mitigating factors that we need to look at and review in regards to taking a look at this. But certainly some of our concerns are going to be the capital dollars that are available in the short, medium, and long term as we look at the additional services that may or may not be needed, and then the operational dollars and how those affect our